I had been unknowingly sexting my hot stepbrother. I stared at my phone, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. My heart thudded in my chest like I'd just sprinted up 3 flights of stairs. But all I had done was read his latest message. Hunter, the guy I'd been talking to for, 3 weeks now? Maybe 4. It had all blurred together after the first few days. What started as a random chat on some dating app had turned into this. "Come on, Roman," I whispered to myself, staring at his text again. "Can't stop thinking about your hands on me. Bet you drive me insane." My face burned, and I bit my lip, feeling a rush of heat travel down my neck and straight to my chest. Okay, not just my chest. Hunter was good at this. Too good. I wasn't exactly a sexting expert. Hell, I had been a virgin until last year. But he had a way of making me feel like I was interesting. Hot even, like I could be this bold, confident guy he made me out to be in his message. I typed out a response, erasing it 3 times before finally settling on, "You don't even know what my hands can do." Corny. It was so corny. But before I could talk myself out of it, I hit send. The dots popped up instantly. Of course, he was fast. Maybe I don't, but I'd like to find out. "You'd look so good under me, Roman." Jesus. My breath caught, and I pressed the back of my hand against my burning face. Was this guy trying to kill me? Because it was working. I tried asking him questions, of course. Where was he from? And what did he do for work? He always gave me a vague answer, turning the conversation back to me. It should have annoyed me. But instead, it just made him more mysterious. Like this sexy, unobtainable guy who somehow wanted me, of all people. And that made it hotter. Not knowing, imagining his face, his body, and the way he'd sound if he was actually in my bed, instead of just in my texts. I typed again, feeling braver than I should. "You talk a big game. What would you do if I let you?" I barely had time to regret it before his reply came in. "Everything you'd beg me for." My heart flipped, my palms sweaty. God, this was insane. But I couldn't stop. A week later, it passed midnight, and I should have been asleep. But instead, I was curled up under my blanket, my phone in my hand, chatting with Hunter. Our conversations had a way of pulling me in, making the world fade away, until it was just the 2 of us. "Still awake? Or are you secretly dreaming about me?" I smirked, my finger hovering over the keyboard. "Dreaming? More like trying to figure out how someone like you is real." He responded almost instantly. "Careful, Roman. You keep saying things like that, and I'll start thinking you're into me." I hesitated, my heart doing the stupid flutter thing like it always did when he flirted. "What if I am?" I typed, hitting send before I could chicken out. There was a pause, and I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. Then his reply came through. "Good, because I'm definitely into you." My face burned, and I bit my lip to keep from grinning like an idiot. "You're trouble, you know that." "Oh, I know. But you like trouble, don't you?" I couldn't help it. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Maybe. Tell me something, Roman. What would you do if I were there right now?" My breath hitched. His words sent a thrill through me, one I didn't want to admit I felt. I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. He didn't wait for me. "Would you let me get close? Would you let me touch you? Tease you until you couldn't think straight?" My throat went dry. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my brain short-circuiting as his words filled my head with images I shouldn't be thinking about. "You're unbelievable," I finally typed, trying to deflect. "I'm serious, Roman. I'd make you feel good. Better than anyone else has," he replied instantly. A shiver ran down my spine, and I turned off the screen, burying my face in my pillow. He was too much, too smooth, too charming, and the worst part, I loved it. 2 weeks later, Thanksgiving at Grandma's house always smelled like roasted turkey and freshly baked apple pies. It was cozy, warm and familiar, a sharp contrast to the chaos that my family was. Even though my mom and Oliver's dad divorced 2 years ago, Grandma refused to let that stop her from inviting me. "Family is family," she said. waving off any awkwardness. It was sweet, really, except for one problem: Oliver. I was settling at the table, focusing on lining up the plates, when I felt a nudge on my side. Still precise as ever, Oliver's voice teased, his low tones sending an unwelcoming shiver down my spine. I scowled, refusing to look at him. "And you're still annoying as ever," he chuckled, leaning closer, which only made it worse. "You missed a fall." I turned to glare at him, but of course there he was, standing way too close, looking way too good. His blonde hair was tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed, and his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders in a way that was not fair. "Don't you have something better to do?" I muttered, feeling my cheeks heat. "Not really." His grin was maddening. "Annoying you is my holiday tradition." I rolled my eyes, trying to ignore the flutter in my chest. This was Oliver, my former stepbrother, the guy who used to steal my fries and call me a nerd when I studied instead of watching movies with him. But now, he was just annoying. He was something else, something I couldn't let myself think about. Grandma called from the kitchen, breaking the tension. "Roman, sweetheart, can you bring out the cranberry sauce?" "On it," I called back, practically fleeing the room. In the kitchen, I pressed my palms on the cool counter, trying to collect myself. This was ridiculous. He wasn't even technically my stepbrother anymore, but that didn't make it okay. Thinking about him like that was wrong. Scandalous even. Thinking about me again? I jumped, spinning around to see Oliver leaning against the doorway, smirking, like he owned the place. "Get over yourself," I snapped, grabbing the cranberry sauce and brushing past him. But as I walked, I couldn't stop my thoughts from racing. Why did he have to look at me like that? Why did he make my brain short-circuit with just a stupid smirk? And why, no matter how hard I tried, couldn't I stop thinking about him? The next day, it was late, and I was scrolling through my phone, my mind stuck on one thing: Oliver. Of course, right when I needed a distraction, I saw Hunter's name pop up, and I quickly started typing. "Roman, you ever have someone constantly mess with you for no reason? Like, you know they're trying to get under your skin, but you can't figure out why." A few seconds later, Hunter replied, "Sounds like someone has a crush on you." "Who is he?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. The idea of Oliver having a crush on me? Ridiculous. My stepbrother, Oliver. He's just a big flirt. Loves getting on my nerves. Maybe he's trying to get your attention. You think it could be that? I snorted. Hell no. He's just a jerk. He loves pushing my buttons. He's been doing it forever. Doesn't mean he likes me. You sure? Sometimes people act like that when they like someone, especially if you don't know how else to show it. I rolled my eyes, even though no one could see me. It's Oliver. He's a flirt with everyone. He doesn't need a reason. Maybe, but if he's always in your face, that's not normal flirting. People usually do if they're trying to get close. I frowned thinking about it. Oliver was always around, always teasing me. But it couldn't be that. But could that be it? Nah, he's just annoying. And anyway, he's my stepbrother. And just thinking about him like that, I get it. But didn't you tell me your parents separated? Meaning? He's no longer your stepbrother. Besides, labels don't really change how someone feels. I sighed, staring at the screen. I wasn't sure of what to make of it, but now I couldn't stop thinking about it. Could Oliver really have feelings for me? 2 weeks later. The clock read 1:47 a.m., and the glow from my phone screen was the only light in my dark room. I'd been staring at Hunter's last message for what felt like forever. Hey, still with me? His text flashed again. I typed and erased 3 different responses before setting on. Yeah, just thinking. He replied almost immediately. Care to share? Or should I guess? I smiled faintly, my fingers hesitating over the keyboard. Do you ever feel like you're standing still while everyone else had it all figured out? There was a pause, long enough to make me wonder if I'd overshared. But then he responded. There was a long pause, all the time. But I also think standing still isn't a bad thing sometimes. Sometimes it means you're just waiting for the right moment to move. I stared at his words, something warm unfurling in my chest. You make it sound easy. It's not, but maybe you don't have to figure it all out right now. Maybe it's okay to just be. His words settling into me in a way I hadn't expected. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just say what I feel. And what I feel right now is that you're being way too hard on yourself, he texted back. My heart clenched. No one had ever spoken to me like this before, with such kindness, such understanding. It was almost unbearable. Sometimes I feel like I'm not enough. I typed, the confusion slipping out before I could stop it. This time, his reply took longer, and I'd wondered if I'd scared him off. But when it came, it hit me like a tidal wave. Roman, you are more than enough. You're kind, thoughtful, and honestly, I think you're incredible. The way you open up, the way you share pieces of yourself. It's amazing. His text read out, making my heart overwhelmed with raw emotion. My throat tightened, and I blinked rapidly to keep the tears from spilling. I'd never heard those words before. Not from anyone. Why do you care so much? I typed, half afraid to answer. Because I see you, and I think if you saw yourself in the way I do, you'd never doubt your worth again. I bit my lip, my hand trembling as I typed my response. You don't even know what I look like, what I sound like. How can you feel this way? His reply was immediate. None of that matters. What I know is you, the way you think, the way you feel. That's what I've fallen for. My breath hitched, and I had to set my phone down for a moment, my head spinning, fallen, for the words lingering in the air, like a challenge, like an invitation. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a silly crush or passing fling. I had fallen for him, deeper than I'd ever thought possible. About a week later, the mall was packed with holiday shoppers, everyone running around with their arms full of bags, carols playing overhead like an endless loop of cheer. I'd already gotten everything on my list, but I was still wandering aimlessly, trying to avoid the crowds near the exit. That's when I saw him. Oliver, I asked, half surprised and half annoyed. He was standing in front of a display of cologne looking indecisive. He turned to the sound of my voice, flashing a usual smug grin. Roman, didn't think I'd run into you here. Buying gifts for all your secret admirers? I rolled my eyes. I'm like you, I don't have a fan club. What are you doing here? Last minute shopping, he said, holding up a sleek bottle of cologne. What do you think? Too much? Trying not to notice how good he looked in his dark coat and scarf. Depends who it's for. Oliver stepped closer, his brown eyes glinting with amusement. Maybe you? I snorted, shoving past him to look at the other display. As if, who's the lucky girl? Or guy? Why do you assume it's not for me? He teased. I like smelling good, you know. I didn't answer, too focused on the shiny ornament on the nearby tree. It was easier than looking at him, but when he got like this, playful, confident, too much. Then he said something that made me freeze. By the way, did you ever get that gingerbread latte you mentioned last week? I heard they're pretty good this time of year. I turned to him slowly, my stomach doing an uneasy flip. I had mentioned a gingerbread latte, but not to him. Only Hunter. Yeah, I said cautiously. How did you know about that? Oliver shrugged, his expression unreadable. You just seemed like that type to try one. It did make sense, but I let it go. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Still, the way he smiled at me, like he knew something I didn't, left me uneasy. A few days later, Christmas at Grandma's was louder than Thanksgiving, mostly because of my cousins had come into town. The house was a whirlwind of kids running around, wrapping paper flying everywhere, and Grandma making sure everyone was stuffed with cookies. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed Oliver across the room. He was in the corner, hunched over his phone, his expression oddly serious. Something about him made me pause. He wasn't the type to brood. He was usually loud and confident, the center of attention. But now, he looked almost nervous. I got up, casually wandering over, like I needed a refill of hot cocoa. As I got closer, I noticed the screen of his phone. A familiar app icon flashed at the top before he quickly turned off the screen. My stomach dropped. Was that a dating app? What are you hiding? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Oliver looked up too quickly, his smirk snapping back into place like armor. Nothing. Just texting a friend. I narrowed my eyes. Uh-huh. Sure. He stood brushing past me, with that infuriating ease he always had. Jealous? No. I snapped, even though my face burned. As he walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling I had just missed something important, something big. Finally, by the night, the chaos had finally settled. Most of the families had gone to bed, and the house was quiet, except for the soft crackling of the dying fire in the living room. I was still awake, curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone to distract myself. Across the room, Oliver's phone was laying on the coffee table where he had left it earlier. I hadn't stopped thinking about what I had seen earlier. The dating app icon, flashing on his screen before quickly shutting it off. It could have been nothing. Lots of people use dating apps, but something about it made my chest tight. Something about it made me wonder. Before I could overthink it, I stood up, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby. Then I picked up his phone. The screen lit up, and to my surprise, it wasn't locked. Typical Oliver, careless as ever. I hesitated, guilt clawing at me, but curiosity won out. I tapped the app, and the first thing I saw was Hunter's profile picture. My breath caught in my throat. It didn't make sense. This couldn't be real. But then I opened his chat history, and there it was. Every single message we exchanged. My flirty comments, my late-night confessions, every stupid, vulnerable thing I said it to Hunter was right there. Oliver was Hunter. My stomach churned as the truth hit me like a freight train. All this time, the guy I had been falling for, the guy who made my heart race with every text, was him? My stepbrother? I spun around, dropping the phone like I had burned it. Oliver stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression somewhat between worried and guilty. "You? It was you? The whole time?" He sighed, running a hand through his messy blonde hair. "Roman, let me explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "You lied to me. You pretended to be someone else to mess with me?" "No, it wasn't like that." He stepped closer, but I backed away. I never meant for it to go this far. And then I couldn't stop. "It wasn't a game, Roman. I care about you." I shook my head, my chest tightening. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to make a mess of my head. Make me think. My voice broke, and I turned away, grabbing my coat. "Roman, wait," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. But I couldn't look at him, couldn't face the raw honesty in his eyes. I grabbed the door handle, my hands trembling. "I trusted you," I said quietly, walking out into the cold night. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a knock on my chest. Betrayal, confusion, hurt, it all swirled together, threatening to drown me. Underneath it all, I couldn't stop caring about him. 3 days later, I couldn't believe it. Oliver was standing on my doorstep again, his hand raised to a knock, his face set into a familiar stubborn expression. I knew exactly what he was here for. He wanted to apologize. I opened the door just a crack, enough to see his tired eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, like he'd been running on nothing but guilt. "Roman, please," he said softly, his voice almost pleading. "I need to talk to you. I know I messed up, but—" I cut him off, shaking my head. "No, Oliver. I don't want to hear it. I couldn't do this. Not right now. Not after everything. Please?" "Leave," I said, voice hard. "I don't want you here." His eyes flickering with pain. But he didn't argue. He stood there for a second, looking at me like he was trying to decide whether to say something else. But instead, he dropped his shoulders and turned to walk away. I shut the door quickly, locking it behind me, like it would lock away the feelings that I had been building in my chest for days. But then, knocking. Soft at first, almost hesitant, but then louder, more persistent. "Oliver." I pressed my palms against my ears, trying to block it out. I knew he wouldn't give up, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him in, not tonight. I could feel the warmth of his anger still coiled tight in my gut. He had messed everything up. The knocking continued what felt like an eternity, his voice calling out my name softly through the door, almost like a plea. "Roman. Roman, I'm sorry. Please, just talk to me." I didn't move. I couldn't. Eventually, the knocking stopped. Silence filled the house. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding, as I listened for any sign that he was still out there. But all I heard was the muffled sound of wind picking up, the cold creeping into the house from the gaps in the window. I exhaled, sinking back into my couch, rubbing my eyes. I couldn't deal with him tonight, not like this. But then, in the dead of night, I woke up shivering, cold. The moonlight slanted across my room, and I felt it. Snow. It was falling outside, gently at first, but then the snowflakes were thick now, blanketing everything. I couldn't resist. I got up, pulled on my slippers, and walked over to the door, opening to see the snow swirling in the night air. But what I saw next almost made my heart stop. There, curled up on the steps of my porch, was Oliver. He was hunched over, arms wrapped around himself, his face hidden in the collar of his jacket. His body trembled with the cold. He was particularly covered in snow, his hair damp and matted to his forehead. I rushed over to him, my heart racing, hands shaking. "Oliver!" I shouted, kneeling down next to him. "What the hell are you doing here?" He stirred, his eyes blinking open slowly, and for a second, he almost looked relieved to see me. "Roman." His voice was quite hoarse. He barely even seemed to be aware of how bad he looked, how much danger he put himself in. I grabbed his arm, pulling him up, and helped him inside. "What the hell were you thinking? You could have frozen to death out there." He didn't say anything, just looked at me, with almost an empty expression. I was furious, but I could feel my anger slipping away, replaced by a deep concern. I rushed to the kitchen, grabbed a blanket, and wrapped it around him before making him sit on the couch. He looked like a mess, his lips blue, hands shaking. "I'll get you something hot," I muttered, heading for the kettle. A moment later, I brought him a mug of hot cocoa, sipping slowly. "Why the hell would you do that?" I said, my voice softening. "You could have died out there." Oliver looked down, his fingers curling around his mug. "I was waiting for you," he said quietly, almost as if it was nothing. I wanted to apologize. I thought if I waited, you'd talk to me, but I froze. He'd wait for me outside? In the cold? I shook my head, feeling my heart break a little more. "You're insane, you know that?" He gave a weak smile, his eyes locking with mine. "Yeah, maybe, but it doesn't change what I feel. I've always had a crush on you, Roman, since we were kids. From the moment I had known you, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell, tell him how messed up it was, how it shouldn't have happened, how it couldn't happen. The part that had been ignoring how I felt about him for so long just melted. I didn't say anything, just stared at him, still too shocked to process it. I never knew how to tell you." Oliver continued, his voice softer now. "I thought it would be weird, but then it got stronger. I couldn't ignore it anymore." My breath caught in my throat. I felt it too," I admitted quietly. "But we were stepbrothers, Oliver. It's wrong." His face softened, but he didn't want to move closer. I know, but that's how I felt, and I can't change it." I stood up, running a hand through my hair, frustrated with myself. "You need to stay. Just stay here tonight, okay?" I grabbed another blanket from the closet and draped it over the sofa. "I don't want you going back out there." He nodded without hesitation, curling up on the couch. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. But when I went downstairs, there was no sign of Oliver, just a note on the table. "Thank you for last night. I'm sorry again for everything. Hope we can talk soon." I stared at it for a long time, my heart heavy with everything I'd learned about Oliver's feelings and everything I wasn't sure about. He was gone, but I knew I couldn't ignore what happened between us anymore. A few hours later, it was New Year's Eve, and Grandma's house was cozy as always, the warmth of the fireplace flickering softly in the corner, and the scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air. The clock on the wall ticked steadily towards midnight, but my mind was miles away, tangled in thoughts of Oliver. I hadn't seen or heard from him since morning. The note he'd left me sat on my dresser, reminding me of everything we'd said and everything I hadn't said. I knew I was supposed to be figuring this out, but it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff staring down. unsure of whether to jump or turn back. Grandma must have noticed my distant expression, because she called me over to where she sat in her armchair, knitting something that looked like a scarf. "Come sit with me, Roman," she said with a smile. "I can see you're 1,000 miles away." I pulled my chair over to hers and sat down, rubbing the back of my neck. "Sorry, just thinking about stuff." She gave me that look, the one that she made me feel like she could see right through me. "You're thinking about Oliver, aren't you?" I froze, not sure what to say. "Love isn't straight," she said softly. "Sometimes it's messy, complicated, but if you love someone, don't just let them go, no matter how many reasons you have to stay away." I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of her words. "But it's wrong, Grandma," I whispered. "He was my stepbrother. He still feels like family." But my voice trailed off, unsure on how to finish the sentence. Grandma set down her knitting and reached over, gently squeezing my hand. "Family doesn't always mean the same thing it used to. Roman, love doesn't care about labels or timing. It just is. And when you find it, you should grab it with both hands." Her words echoed in my mind, louder than the tick of the clock. I thought about Oliver, how he'd waited for me in the cold, how he confessed everything to me, how I shut him out because of the fear and confusion I felt. And yet, a part of me had always known I wasn't just running from him. I was running from myself. "Grandma," I started, my voice breaking. "What if I mess it up? What if he's gone already?" She smiled softly, that knowing smile that always made me feel like everything would be okay. "If you don't try, you'll never know. And if you wait too long, you'll regret it." I stood up, suddenly feeling more certain than I had in days. The clock was ticking towards midnight, but right now, it felt like I had all the time in the world to fix this, to fix us. "Thanks, Grandma," I said quietly, a weight lifting off my chest. She nodded at me, her eyes sparkling like she already knew what I was about to do. I walked to the door, opening it just enough to let in the cool night air. The world outside was blanketed in snow, the stars shining above. I took a deep breath, then stepped out into the night, knowing exactly where I needed to go. About an hour later, I couldn't think straight as I ran through the streets, my heart racing in my chest. By the time I reached Oliver's building, I was already out of breath. I didn't even knock, just pushed open the door and rushed in. There he was, standing in the middle of the room, completely stunned when he saw me. His eyes widened, lips parted as if he couldn't believe I was actually here. "Roman?" His voice was soft, almost a whisper. I couldn't hold back anymore. I was a mess. My thoughts scrambled. My chest was tight with everything I'd been keeping in. "I'm sorry," I blurted out, stepping closer. I was so confused, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand what I was feeling, but I ran my hand through my hair, my words trembling out in a rush. "I care about you. I care about you so much, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. But I was scared of what it meant, scared of messing everything up." Oliver took a step closer, his hands reaching up, cupping my face gently, like he was trying to ground me. He looked at me with such intensity, his voice barely above a whisper. "Roman, just tell me one thing," he said, his thumb brushing softly over my skin. "Do you love me?" It was like the world stopped spinning. I looked into his eyes, and I didn't hesitate for a second. "With all my heart," I whispered, the words feeling like a weight lifted off my chest. The clock struck midnight, the sound echoed in the room, but neither of us moved. And then he kissed me. It was everything I imagined. Warm, soft, like he was pulling me into a world where nothing else mattered. I kissed him back with everything I had. All the fear, all the confusion, all the longing I'd been holding in. When we pulled away, breathless, Oliver smiled, his forehead resting against mine. "Happy New Year," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Happy New Year," I whispered back, knowing that this wasn't just the beginning of the new year. It was also the start of something new. A new start for us. Conclusion. Grandma was over the moon when I finally told her. She gave me a proud smile, like she knew everything would work out. And surprisingly, our parents were understanding too. There was no awkward conversation, just quiet acceptance, like they'd known we'd get here eventually. I never felt more at peace, more seen, more at home. With Oliver, everything just made sense. All the fears, the doubts, they melted away the moment I let myself truly be with him. Now every day felt like a new beginning. I couldn't wait to spend my life with him. Whatever came next, I knew we'd face it together for the first time. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The end. Had you been in Ramon's place, would you have done it? Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of the Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.